everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of Table Talk Sessions, the True Crime Chronicles. Table Talk Sessions is about having authentic conversations, so I hope that by sharing some of these crimes or cases, that it will help us to generate authentic conversations and being more cognizant to the relationships and friendships that we entertain, and of course, watching for those red flags. In today's gripping episode of Table Talk Sessions, the True Crime Chronicles, we delve into the case of Whitney Hurd, a beloved Charlotte realtor whose life was tragically cut short in July of 2024. Whitney's former high school friend, Brandon Braxton, a former Duke University football player, stands to be accused of her brutal murder. Now, join us as we explore their complex relationship, the chilling events leading up to Whitney's death, and the investigation that led to Brendan's arrest and confession. Interestingly, today is his day to appear before the court. Today is April the 9th, 2025, when I'm recording this. And just so happened, this is by happenstance while researching this case, that today is the day that he's to appear in court. How crazy is that? This episode sheds light on the importance of recognizing red flags in personal relationships and the devastating consequences that can come when we ignore them. And again, we're all about the red flags.
New this morning, we are learning that the suspect charged in the death of 32-year-old Charlotte realtor will be in court today. CMPD arrested 33-year-old Brandon Braxton earlier this week. He's currently charged with first-degree murder. It all stems from a homicide back in July. Police responding to this South Park townhome on Warburg Street and found 32-year-old Whitney Hurd dead. She was originally reported missing. Braxton is set to face a judge this morning, coming up at 10 a.m.
Pay homage to the victim, especially when they are sincerely a victim of what has happened. Like it was uncalled for, and it was just like uncanny. So I'm paying homage to the victim in this case. Her name was Whitney Hurd. So Whitney Hurd her name is Whitney Elizabeth Hurd. She was a 32-year-old realtor based in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was known for her infectious smile and laughter, qualities that endeared her to clients and friends alike. I'm also a native of North Carolina, just a tidbit about me. Whitney graduated from the University of South Carolina in 2014, where she was an active member of the Delta 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 sorority. Now, her dedication to her profession and her vibrant personality made her fellow community really love her. So it sounds like Whitney had an amazing personality. And to the family, as you're grieving, and hopefully in doing videos such as this, the family will know that her name lives on into the data, and people can use this example, unfortunately, to gauge the red flags and relationships, and seeking help and support to protect themselves from people such as, unfortunately, Brandon, who take lives unwarranted. So now I'm going to actually speak on the abuser, the person who brought Whitney's demise at an early juncture of her lifetime. And his name is Brandon David Braxton. Now, at the time of his arrest, he was 33 years old, and he was formerly a high school friend of Whitney's. And that's important to note because in this series that I'm doing, I'm talking about red flags and being mindful of the friendships and the relationships that you entertain. And I saw this video the other day. I may try to insert it in a reel or something so that you all can see what I'm talking about. But it's a divorce lawyer, and he's talking to the podcast host, and he asked him, the podcast host, he says, "Do you know who the most dangerous person is to you?" And the host is like, "I don't know." And he said, "The person that you marry, the person that you're in a relationship with." And he was given so many examples in this particular podcast of occurrences of relationships, people who divorce, and all these things. But his point was, when you watch criminal court cases, or you're watching true crime and different things, and it's typically the wife, or it's the husband, or it's the girlfriend, or the boyfriend. He was saying 70% of the time that is true. So my point to say that is, Whitney knew Brandon. She knew the Brandon from high school. not necessarily the Brandon of his 30s. Just like he did not know the Whitney of her 30s because they reconnected. And so they attended high school together in Charlotte at Providence High. And then Brandon goes to play football for Duke University from 2010 to 2013. Now, he had a very good, it sounds like, football career as the wide receiver. And then, of course, we'll talk about how Whitney went to her school, to college. And so you evolve, right? One of the things and the point that I have on the screen is that people can change. So I was talking to my friend the other day, and she and I've been friends for years, and we were just talking about how things have changed as we're adulting, and I was talking about, middle school, high school, college, and now we're in our mid 30s. And she was saying, people can change, and not necessarily in a positive way all the time, but in the negative. And so we led into another part of the conversation about people masking. And when I say masking, I mean the person that shows up and you feel like you're talking to and connecting to may not be the person that you think you know. Like there's this show called Who the Bleep Did I Marry, right? There are people who have been married in these relationships, or they're dating people, they're friends with people, and you think because you've been friends with these people for years that you know them. But do you know them? So we were also talking about representatives. Like literally, you can have a representative. There's a representative of when you're in your home. There could be a representative of when you're out in the public. There could be a representative, when you're with your person that you're dating. Like there are representatives that show up. But is it you, the real you? And so we were talking about how, even in friendships or relationships, you might be with a group of people, and then eventually, some of them get married or start having children and all the things. And so the circle that you once had gets smaller and smaller. And then you're maybe meeting new people. And then it's just a cycle of learning people, learning patterns, boundaries, and all the things. And I'm coming full circle because my point to that is to make this, that in his 30s, to me, he's showing mental health challenges, possibly. And that's just my opinion. Okay. It could also be drugs. And so my mind starts to go, what is his motor? What is Brandon's motor? And by motor, it's what's driving him. What is driving him to do the things that he's doing, as we'll talk about on the screen. And the last part before I go and jump back into this case, I'm not on a tangent, I'm on par, is my friend left off with this part of the conversation. And she was sharing that we as people can show up as our authentic selves. Like we can say that we're not masking. We are not putting on a persona. We're not bringing a representative. We are showing up as our true selves. And you can be a good person. You can be a sweet person. You can be a kind person, but that does not guarantee reciprocity. So I give this example with Whitney. Whitney probably was a sweet person, a kind person, a good person. She meets a guy who she was familiar with from high school. And she might have wanted to be kind, thinking that this is the same person from that time, but he has changed. That is all I'm getting at. And the point is, in red flags and in patterns of what this series is talking about, is that we can set up boundaries. We should set up boundaries. We should not give as much on the onset. We should watch for patterns and not ignore what we see, but watch what people do. Because at the end of the day, and at the crux and at the root of it all, is that people are going to people. And we just pray that we do not encounter this level of peopling, meaning where somebody is willing to take you out, to hurt you, to harm you, abuse you, all the things, and that you get to a point of the self awareness like, nah, this ain't it. Like, this ain't life. This ain't what we doing. I'm going to report you. I'm going to call the police. all the things is all I'm saying. Now, back to Brandon and what has happened. So he had legal troubles, as you can see on the screen. Now, Whitney was killed in July of 2024. And so the court record showed that Brandon was arrested at least 7 other times in Charlotte. and had faced charges that included assault on a female, simple assault, injury to property, and larceny. Now, prior to the March 20th arrest, he did not face any charges related to Whitney's death, although he was named a person of interest. Now, as it relates to Whitney's case, Brandon was charged, as you can see on the time, as you will see on the timeline, with first degree murder and robbery with dangerous weapons. Now, the robbery charge came after he had allegedly stole Whitney's BMW and her phone. Now, looking at the charges above, so I was seeing a report that was saying that the sheriff's department, the police, they were all pulling, and in the affidavit that he had all these multiple arrests. So I go to the Mecklenburg Sheriff's Office website and I look up his name, and these are the reports that I pulled as it relates to him. Now, mind you, Whitney was harmed in July. And as you look at the screen, look at the progression of these crazy, sporadic, and just crazy incidents that he's doing. Look at when he's released and just like how it just begins to escalate and continue. So in July of last year, on the 24th, now mind you, this is after she's been harmed, Whitney's been harmed. He is arrested for larceny of motor vehicle, and it was a felony charge. And then he's released in August. Okay. Then in October, he's arrested for indecent exposure. And then he's released the same day. Now, on the first month of January, so on the 2nd of January of 2025, so this year, I'm recording, he is arrested for a misdemeanor of larceny, and then he's released a few days later in January. Then the same month, he's arrested in January on the 23rd for second degree trespassing, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and then he's released in March on the 18th. Now, from 2 days, he was released on the 18th, and 2 days later, he is arrested on March 20th for murder first degree, and it should also say robbery, as it relates to him stealing Whitney's car. So that is what I want to share as it relates to the background to this abuser, and also alluding to these red flags. Now, Whitney was found stabbed to death in July in her South Charlotte townhome. And her townhome was what you saw when I was paying homage to her on that screen. Now, Brandon is accused of stabbing her to death in her home, and her body was found around 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, July 14th in her townhome. Now, the Charlotte Mecklenburg police affidavit that was filed with the court said that a neighbor reportedly saw Braxton driving away from Whitney's home in her vehicle at around 11:20 on July the 4th. Now, she had been reporting missing by her family. She had been reported missing by her family on July the 11th. And to me, that means that, her family was used to her at least checking in. And so they hadn't heard from her. They called for a missing report. Now, police executed a search warrant for Whitney's cell phone, her credit and debit card, social media, and dating apps, which that should also teach us something that they can get an affidavit to search for your phone, your location, to view your credit and debit card swipe-ins, social media access, and then also dating apps. Just bear that in mind, that data clouding and storage and all the data footprints, all of that is real. So be mindful of what you're doing with your devices. Detectives used the location data from the phone records to find the last place that Whitney's phone had pinged. So shout out to Apple for doing their due diligence with technology. Comes into use in this instance for sure. Now, police found her vehicle at the location where her phone was last pinged, but they only found her phone case inside the car. They did not find her phone to recover it. Now, police matched fingerprints inside of the vehicle to Braxton. Mind you, he had been arrested, and so they could pair this at this point formally by March. He's been arrested since July of 2024. So they had enough of his fingerprints to say, hey, his fingerprints were in her vehicle. Now, the Pineville police arrested Brandon on July 24th for unrelated charges, and he was taken to the Mecklenburg jail. Now, when the Charlotte Mecklenburg police detectives took him from the jail to the police headquarters in August, they wanted to interview him. And according to the affidavit, he told detectives that Whitney and he were friends from high school, and that while he had been inside of her home, so he was admitting that he had been in her home before, that he had never been inside of her vehicle. So Brandon, I think you lying there. I think you lying. When asked if he knew what had happened to Whitney and where she was, he would not give any information. He wouldn't verbally say anything. He actually nodded his head, according to the affidavit, to confirm whatever they were asking. He did say, though, that the last time he saw her, she looked petrified, which that was alarming to me to even read. Now, here again is the timeline on the screen. Know that in early of 2024, Whitney and Brandon reconnected after many years apart. And imagine this is probably like 10 years. Okay. And so, people say in relationships, I hit on this in one of my episodes, there's the 7-year itch, or there's a point where people change every 7 years, etc. This is what I'm saying. People can change. Now, their friendship gets renewed, and in Whitney's mind, she might have been like, hey, this my homie, this my guy from high school, but he's literally changed. So they noted also that Brandon, after reconnecting, started showing like obsessive behaviors with Whitney. In July the 11th of 2024, Whitney was reported missing by her family after they were unable to contact her. And then on the 14th, they hired a private investigator who was able to discover Whitney's body in her townhome, and then that she had suffered multiple stab wounds and she was found wrapped in bedding. On the 27th of July, Brandon was arrested on unrelated charges, including the larceny in the motor vehicle. And then in August, during an interview, Brandon was said to have wrote a note, and on the note, he was saying that she seemed petrified. And then in March of the 3rd of 2025, he literally confessed in writing as well that he had killed Whitney. The autopsy report noted that Whitney died after being stabbed 3 times in the chest. That is just crazy. That is tragic. And according to the police affidavit, Braxton, aka Brandon, was again arrested in Pineville on unrelated charges, but this time in January the 23rd of 2025, and he was taken to the jail, the Mecklenburg jail. Now, the court record shows that he was charged with resisting an officer and trespassing inside of the Newport Academy, a teen mental health and substance abuse treatment program in off of Pineville Matthews Road. So I'm going to talk about some of the charges, and just so you can hear the craziness that evolved. Okay. So, and this is after he had harmed Brittany as well. So the court records indicated that this particular day with the trespassing one, that the security was alerting the authorities, because they said that Braxton or Brandon was sitting in a chair in the hallway near the main lobby. And that after the officer arrived and knocked on the window to motion for Brandon to come out, that Brandon nodded his head and that he didn't get out of the chair. So he acknowledged the police officer but didn't move. The officer then went to his car to use the PA system to tell him to come to the door. And Brandon actually got up out of the chair and then just disappeared down the hallway. So the police officers, along with the fire department, had to actually force their way into this center. And when they got into the center, he got down on his knees, laid on the floor, and they arrested him. And essentially, it was for the trespassing and then resisting arrest, because they had done many methods to get him out of that building. Now, he later had told the police that he was in the building because he was cold. So I'm now wondering, was he homeless? There's definitely a uptick in homelessness around Charlotte. For real, for real. It is expensive to live in Charlotte. And shout out to our Raleigh natives. We want you to know that there's an uptick in people coming to Raleigh, which is, and there's an uptick in people coming to Charlotte. And we just want y'all to know that it is expensive. So just be mindful of that, and you're searching of homes if you're coming this way. Anyway, so on March the 3rd, Brandon also submitted like a grievance with the jail, the report said, and that he said that he had killed Whitney, and that was according to the affidavit. And so Brandon remained in jail at this point without bond. Now, the reason that he was in jail without bond, as you can see on the previous slide where it said that he was arrested but not released, or committed but not released, is because when the district court's judge, when he came before with the prosecutor, they asked if the judge would deny bond because he is a flight risk and that he had no family ties, to basically make sure that he did right by the community and citizens. Now, it also was said by the district attorney that the family of Whitney told the police that Brandon hadn't been in touch with her for several years. So the family was also familiar with Brandon, allegedly, right? And so they lost touch after high school, is what the family had told the lawyer, or the district the district attorney. But then that he began showing up at her home. So it seems to me like maybe she moved to Charlotte, they ran into each other one day, reconnected, and then he became like obsessed, right? That's what it comes across. Now, there was an incident that the family told the attorney, which is Brandon showed up to Whitney's house and he was just in her driveway. She couldn't get him to leave, and he was trying to come into her house, but she was telling him no. And so she was also telling her family that the day this happened, that he was intoxicated. Now, it was later also said that Brandon actually broke into her home, and then she ended up calling the police. So what I love about this part, unfortunately, that she's passed, was that she did alert the police and she told her family of what Brandon tried to do. Now, in an interview with the detectives, he confessed to actually hurting or harming or bringing demise to Whitney. And that's what they were sharing in the court. And so, because Brandon had had so many different incidents, like what I showed on the previous screens, or on the pictures, he was charged like previously with assaulting a woman in October, and that he had attempted to like grab her shorts. And so it was just like a lot of different things that he'd been doing that said that he is a risk to society at this point. The indecent exposure charge, he exposed his nude body to a person like on the same day. He's trying to grope a woman and then he exposes himself. This is on the same day. That was one example. One of the other charges was that he had threw a brick through a window in Charlotte, and they had caught him on the surveillance camera shouting like cougar or America perfect, and he was walking away, but they caught him on camera to prove that he had done it. And then also he had the pending charges that I'm mentioning. There was an allegation that he had punched a man in the upper lip, gave him a black eye at a gas station. That was one of the charges, and this was in December of 2024, right? And then there was a woman who was standing like outside, and this happened in January. She was holding a binder, but in the binder was like $27. And so she actually like tackled him. It was on camera. She tackled him, put him in a chokehold so that she could get her binder and the money back. And so the police asked the hotel for the surveillance. They saw it and saw that she was telling the truth, that he had stole her binder and she tackled him to basically get her stuff back. So all of that, I'm saying to you that Brandon and all of these crazy charges were also pending, meaning yes, he was released, but he had not come to the court yet to figure out what was his sentencing, what was the outcome yet. So not only has he harmed Whitney, but he also has these other 6 other cases where he has to represent and get a penalty for. Now, the evidence that I want to say, because again, today, the ninth, is the day that he's appearing in court. And the penalties for today, or the hearing he's appearing for today, is due to the murder and the robbery charge. Okay. And that's scheduled. So I'll have to come back with the update. But the evidence that's stacked against him, the physical evidence, are the fingerprints matching his that was in Whitney's home and the BMW. There's the witness testimony that the neighbors reported seeing him drive away in her car. And then the behavioral indicators are all of these other erratic behaviors that he's been doing. And then the digital evidence, their surveillance footage and cell phone records, essentially putting Brandon near Whitney's residence around the time of her disappearance. So it will be interesting to see what the outcome, will be for Brandon. What is your take in the comments? I do want to hear you let me know. Do you think that it's legit just like obsession, or do you think that there's a mental health issue or concern and she unfortunately just was looped into the crazy? What are your thoughts? What do you think is driving his motor, and what caused him to snap or to do this? What do you think? Now, if you've made it this far, thank you for following along as we've shared this crazy story and unfortunately the loss of Whitney Hurd. Now, while Brandon's future remains uncertain, Whitney's tragic experience underscores the importance of recognizing and addressing red flags in personal relationships. Obsessive behaviors, boundary violations, and prior legal issues should be taken seriously. So you look up someone, maybe you're in the same city, etc. Do a search. Do a search, an intake search. See if the person's been arrested. For real. Come on, do it. Because at this point, the crazy begets crazy. Trusting one's instincts and seeking assistance when feeling threatened can be life saving. And I will say, in this instance, Whitney tried. It seems like she really tried to get help, but he was working quickly. Now, for women who find themselves in situations where a past acquaintance exhibits concerning behaviors, here are some practical steps to consider. Establishing boundaries, as shared earlier. Clearly communicate your limits, expectations, and if someone repeatedly disregards these boundaries, then that's a serious red flag. Document interactions. So keep a record of all interactions that are not respecting your boundaries or disrespectful or are alarming. And then notify people who love you. If it's a friend, if it's a family member, so that they are aware as well. This could be very crucial in legal action later on. And then, when we're informing our trusted, people, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, that can help support emotionally and assisting with practical advice on what you can do. And then ultimately, trust your instincts. And if something feels off, prioritize your safety. It's better to distance yourself from potentially harmful situations than to dismiss your feelings. That is something, my friend, also we talked about how sometimes you have that gut instinct and you just don't want to trust your gut. So there are times that we see red flags and we bypass it. We're like, no, that can't be what it is. But it is. It is. So in this instance, I want you to remember that you are strong. You can be a good person. You can be authentic. You can be sweet. You can be all these things. But your well-being is paramount, and resources are available to support you. And so I'll end with the question to you, the YouTube community, as I invite you to reflect on this case and this upcoming trial and etc. How can individuals better protect themselves when past acquaintances exhibit certain concerning behaviors? Share your insights, experiences in the comments below. I've seen so much feedback and people, seeing similarities and understanding the purpose of this series, and that I appreciate so much. Your perspectives can foster a community of awareness and support, and that's the purpose in this, to help other people. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and let me know if you enjoyed. Also, look out for the next episode. If you have a suggestion on a case that you would like me to investigate, let me know that too. Until next time, bye bye.